Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. We come to you from Homedale, New Jersey. We're in the lobby of Bell Works, which is the old Bell Laboratories, and we're here for a very special edition of Jersey Matters as we look ahead to Tuesday's election and some of the key races. The congressional races in New Jersey will be a bellwether as to what's going to happen across the rest of the country. In a moment, we'll go district to district to look at some of the key races. But we begin with my interview with Chris Smith, Republican Congressman from the 4th Congressional District, who's running for re-election against Democratic newcomer Josh Welle. We are recording this in the aftermath of a horrific shooting in Pittsburgh at a synagogue. I wanted to get your thoughts about it, but I also wanted to get your thoughts about a tweet that was put out by Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, who said that Congress is complicit in these shootings.
I think that's such an overreach. There's a growing tide of anti-Semitism in the United States and worldwide. I'm part of and helped form a caucus in Congress to combat anti-Semitism. I actually wrote the law in 2004 to create the special envoy, which is an international effort, but it also resonates right back to here because anti-Semitism is rising. My first trip outside this country was to the Soviet Union in 1982 on behalf of Soviet Jews because of the unbelievable discrimination and prejudice and jailing and psychiatric prison, other things that was leveled against them simply because they were Jewish. So anti-Semitism has not abated. The FBI does a report every year on hate crimes, and Catholics and Christians, about 10% thereabouts every year. Muslims, about 10% or so in terms of the number of hate crimes. Jews, Jewish people, it's over 50%, and they're less than 2% of the population. So there is an absolute disproportionality when it comes to this hatred that dates back for centuries, the Holocaust being one of the most cruelest manifestations of it. And now we're seeing a rising tide, sadly, in the United States directed towards Jewish people. And what happened, obviously, in Pittsburgh is a horrific manifestation of that hate. And we need to combat it every time,
and
everywhere.
How do you combat it? Let's talk about that for a second, because
sure.
that was the root of the tweet of Senator Blumenthal. Other Democrats came out and they didn't attack Congress, but they said they renewed calls for gun control. They renewed calls for a ban on assault weapons. And if this blue wave happens that some people are predicting, the Democrats might take the House, they could take the Senate. And they would be pushing for gun control.
Well,
where do you come
well,
down?
I really believe it. And I was endorsed by the Brady campaign. And do believe very strongly that, and I voted for the ban on assault weapons that lapsed after 10 years. It should have been continued, as well as more effective background checking. There are loopholes that need to be closed. They weren't closed when the Democrats controlled the House and Senate and when the Republicans controlled it. So it's time to reassess and say, every constitutional right, free speech, does have some limitations, and I would say the Second Amendment, which I support very strongly, ought to have some very important and reasonable limitations to ensure that people like the shooter, the murderer in Pittsburgh, is less likely. You can't take it away completely because nothing does that.
It seems like it wouldn't have stopped it.
It probably wouldn't have stopped it, but we don't know that.
He never committed a crime. He wasn't even anybody's radar, law enforcement's radar.
But we're more apt to stop someone, and maybe a lot of someones, if we are able to do a more universal background check, and that loophole needs to be closed.
Let me get to the campaign, because
sure.
I just listened to your debate on Facebook at the Asbury Park
Went
Press.
very well.
It was more contentious, I think, than anybody thought it would be. You called your opponent presumptuous. You said that he was rude. You used other adjectives as well. He said perverse when talking about you. Is any of that helpful?
Well, he initiated it, and let me say this very, very clearly. I have never in any of my campaigns, and I've run for office many times, had somebody who has so deliberately distorted and lied about my record. How he says one thing here, another thing there, accuses me of all kinds of things. I mean, here's an example, and you probably are aware of it. I was a staunch advocate and will always be a staunch advocate of making sure that our veterans are first in the line and their families. I am the author of 14, count them, 14, prime author, very important bills, including the Comprehensive Homeless Assistance Act, to help our veterans get off the streets, into jobs, into housing, to get the help if they have PTSD or chemical dependency problems. And I wrote that law. And when I was working on that law, the number of veterans on the street on any given night was estimated to be about 295,000 on the streets any given night. Now it's about 40,000. 40,000 too many. But the numbers have dropped dramatically because of that law. In like manner, I worked on a number of healthcare initiatives, polytrauma centers, wrote the law for that, and I boosted the Montgomery GI Bill by about 60%. Which made its utilization rates go up significantly.
Can you get back to the debate for a second?
Sure.
You wanted to bring this up because he said something that you.
Oh, he has said that I have no empathy for the veterans' families. He has said other things too, that I really haven't done much, if anything, for veterans. He even said, "Where are the health centers for Central Jersey?" Time out. I brought 3 of them here. The Brick Clinic, it took me about 8 years to bring that. It has 71,000 patient visits per year. The Hamilton community-based outpatient center there, and also the one that is now in Tinton Falls. First, I brought it to Fort Monmouth. When Fort Monmouth closed, we just had it relocated just several miles away. So the utilization, matter of fact—
He denied that he said that you ever said that you had no empathy for veterans.
We have it on tape. I mean, that's the beauty. He tapes everything, puts it out on social media. We monitor it, and we have it there right in black and white or on video where you can watch it, and then he says something else, as he did in that debate. He contradicted himself right on the debate.
We had him on our show. He
Yeah,
was on the show once before, and let me get you to respond to some of the things he said about you. What he went after you on the most, it seemed like, is the fact that you haven't had a town hall in 25 years.
I have exchanges, Larry, all the time with my constituents. You name it, issues. And when I had, for example, at the beginning of this Congress, a major meeting on Alzheimer's. I chaired the Alzheimer's caucus, and I want to say parenthetically, and I hope every person who is concerned about that terrible disease realizes, I have led the effort on Alzheimer's for the past 20 years. I'm chairman of the caucus. We have 181 members in our caucus, bipartisan, because I believe in bipartisanship if you really want to get things done. We've gone from $600 million just 5 years ago to $2.3 billion for medical research.
Let's get to the town hall.
So here's what they did. A group of so-called activists came to my meeting on Alzheimer's, and they called it an ambush and took over the meeting, disrupted it, and people who were there to talk about Alzheimer's were appalled. They couldn't believe how rude they were.
But they say 25 years. That's what he says. He says 25
who cares?
years.
I mean, I have meetings all the time with my constituents. I meet with them one-to-one. We resolve
So you wouldn't have them if you're reelected? You're not going to have a town hall?
I'll have issue-oriented town meetings, but right now, if you look at the people that are trying to disrupt as they do so methodically, I've read their manual. They talk about disruption and how they want to they put people all around the audience to ask the same question to just keep coming back, and people who have had town meetings have found that the lack of civility is so profound. I'm talking about Republicans, not Democrats.
It's used sometimes as a campaign strategy. I know it is.
And I go out and I speak at schools. I take questions for an hour, hour and a half, whatever the school will allow me to do, and I love it because I do like that exchange. But let me just go back a few years ago, back in a little over 10 years ago. There was a group calling for town meetings. I said, okay, I'll meet with you in my office for an hour, hour and a half, and went an hour and a half. They were so unhappy with the exchange because I invited a reporter because I thought they would walk out and distort what I said. They couldn't because we had a reporter sitting there, wrote a great piece in the Trenton Times, above the fold, big article about the meeting. Then they came back and they trashed my office.
So you
and the
see
police had to come and they said, this is
just because we're running out of time.
Lack of
So
civility.
you see these sometimes as a setup. You see the town halls as a way of getting you looking bad on camera.
And then splicing it up, editing it, and they've done this, across the country in such a way that looks bad for the person. I debate all the time in Congress, in committee. I love meeting with people who even have a completely diametrically opposed position that I have. I mean, that's what it's all about, representation. But that forum, as opposed to other types of exchanges, has lent itself to nothing but incivility.
We have to wrap this, so I could talk to you. There's so many things we could talk about, but
Right.
we have to adhere to FCC regulations on equal time. And Josh, well, he was here for the same amount of time. I do want to say at the end, in full transparency, though, that we have been working with your office because your office is trying to bring a newscast to New Jersey, and it would be centered in Monmouth County. So I want to make sure that before people call me out on that, that we have been working with you.
And
on
Donald Payne is my chief co-sponsor. Bipartisan again. How I get things passed in Congress, and I've passed more laws into law, from bills to law, than the entire New Jersey delegation combined, including the U.S. senators. When somebody comes into my office, and some of the people listening today will say either we helped them, I helped them, or they know somebody that we helped. You know, when somebody comes into my office or calls or sends an email, I have, tunnel vision, blinders on to say, I'm here to help. And very often I turn what we see as a larger problem into legislation, like on autism, like on David Goldman's case. When David Goldman was
Sir, I can't get into the David
Okay.
Goldman case, but I always
go on and
appreciate
on.
your time. Yes,
Thank you so
I
much.
know.
Thank you, Larry.
I appreciate it. Congressman Chris Smith running for re-election in the 4th Congressional District against Democrat Josh Welle. Jersey Matters continues right after this. Still to come on Jersey Matters, a Libertarian candidate called us out by name for not covering him. So we did. Our interview with Ryan Martinez when Jersey Matters continues.